Why is it that retirees with $750,000 often feel richer than those with $5 million dollars or more? You have noticed this phenomenon as I've sat across from both kinds of retirees in my career, and the difference between them isn't a better investment strategy or a higher income or a lucky market run. Rather, I've found it something far simpler, and once I tell you what it is, you're going to wonder why nobody talks about it more. The fact is that underneath almost every anxious retiree that I've ever sat across from, regardless of what their account value says, the core fear is always the same. What if this isn't enough? What if I outlive it? Or what if I have to go back to work? And one set of retirees has answered that question, whereas the other hasn't. And that gap, not the market, not their balance, not the economy, is what's keeping them awake at night, refreshing their brokerage app and running spreadsheet after spreadsheet, while the other set sleeps like a baby, confident and secure. So today I'm going to tell you exactly what that answer is, where it comes from, and how you can get it. I'm John Norberg, and I'd like to welcome you to this latest edition of the Financial Prof series. Alright, before we go further, I do want to be clear. This is not just anecdotal. The channel isn't called The Financial Prof for no reason. We did the research, and the behavioral finance research on this is remarkably consistent. In fact, psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell first described what they called the hedonic treadmill back in 1978, and their findings have been replicated many times since. The core insight is this: as wealth increases, so too do our expectations, which means that the emotional benefit of each additional dollar tends to diminish over time. The number that felt like enough at $1 million becomes insufficient at $3 million. At $5 million, some retirees are still waiting to feel secure. The goalposts keep moving because the goalposts were never the real problem. And here's the dynamic that I see at work in retirement planning specifically. In accumulation, more is always better. Every additional dollar is unambiguously good, in other words. But the fact is that in retirement, more without a plan just means more to lose. And the fear of loss scales with the size of the portfolio. A 20% market correction on a $750,000 portfolio is painful. On $5 million, it's $1 million or more that could be gone in a quarter with that kind of market correction. Same percentage, entirely different emotional weight. So this isn't a story about money, and it's a story rather about certainty. And certainty doesn't come from the balance, it comes from somewhere else entirely. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to two retirees, one from each side of this divide. When you hear their situations side by side, the difference between them will become very clear, but so too will the one thing that separates them. Meet Walter and Gerald. Walter is 68, retired university professor, did some part-time consulting after he left the classroom. He has $780,000 across an IRA, a Roth, and a small brokerage account, Social Security of $2,400 a month, owns his own home outright. His lifestyle is comfortable, but not extravagant. 2 trips a year, dinners out, generous with his children, his grandchildren, and his church. Walter spends freely, not recklessly, freely. He doesn't agonize over the bill. He doesn't delay the vacation. When his granddaughter needed help with a semester abroad, he wrote the check the same day that she asked. All right, let's talk about Gerald. 67, retired executive, spent 30 years in corporate America. He has $5.2 million spread across multiple brokerage accounts, an IRA, some real estate, and a deferred comp plan that's still paying out. His lifestyle runs about $18K per month. He hasn't claimed Social Security yet. He keeps meaning to model it out. He's had 3 different financial advisors in 5 years. Gerald is smart, no two ways about it. He's successful and genuinely uncertain whether he's going to be okay. He checks his portfolio every morning. He's delayed 2 vacations in the past year, waiting for things to settle down. He gives generously, but there's a flicker of hesitation every time, a quiet voice asking whether he should, and what the tax benefits are, whether that's enough to tilt the scales. Now, the contrast here isn't about lifestyle or spending. Gerald spends more than Walter and always will. The contrast is something deeper. It's about certainty. Walter knows his number, Gerald does not. And not knowing is costing Gerald something that no account balance can ever buy back. So what is it? What is it that Walter knows that Gerald doesn't? It comes down to one thing, and factually speaking, It's not what most people expect. The answer is information. Not market information, not economic forecasts, not a hot investment strategy, rather personal, specific, actionable information about his own situation, about himself, to know thyself. In other words, Walter can answer three questions without hesitation. First, what can I safely spend each month without running out? Second, what does my income look like at 75, at 85, at 95? And third, what happens to my plan if markets drop 30%? And that one can be a crucial one in terms of granting confidence to take the next step. Gerald, by contrast, can't answer any of those with confidence. He has a rough sense of his asset allocation. He has a vague feeling that 5 million ought to be enough, but he's never modeled out his actual spending against his actual portfolio across multiple scenarios and market conditions. He's never seen his numbers laid out in a way that gives him a clear, defensible answer to the question that haunts him. Am I going to be okay? And that is the information gap. It has nothing to do with the size of the account, but rather everything to do with whether someone has done the work to translate a balance sheet into a retirement income plan. And this is where we at Norberg Wealth can add a lot of value to your situation if you feel like Gerald's situation maybe describes you. A balance sheet tells you what you have, but a retirement income plan tells you what you can do with it. Walter has both, Gerald only has one. And here's the part that surprises most people. The information gap doesn't shrink as wealth grows. In fact, for many retirees, I've seen it get worse. Complexity is the enemy of clarity. Gerald, for example, has 7 accounts across 4 institutions, real estate with deferred tax consequences, a deferred comp payout with its own tax profile, and a Social Security timing decision that he keeps postponing. Every additional variable makes the full picture harder to see and easier to avoid looking at. Walter's relative simplicity wasn't a disadvantage, it was a forcing function. It made the work easier to do and harder to avoid at the same time. And there's also something subtler going on with Gerald that I see constantly with high achieving retirees. He spent 40 years being the person who built the wealth, who drove the career forward. The identity of accumulator, disciplined, frugal, always building, is deeply embedded in who he is to himself and to others. Becoming the person who spends that wealth requires a much different psychological transition that many successful people, frankly, struggle with or resist without fully realizing it. The mindset that made them wealthy quietly works against them in retirement. And then there's the moving goalpost. When Gerald had 2 million, he thought 3 million would feel like enough. At 3 million, he thought 5 million would do it. And now he quietly wonders whether 7 million might actually be safer. I see this all the time. It's a planning problem dressed up as a financial one, and no amount of additional accumulation will solve it. And if this sounds like you, if you're feeling a little called out right now, perhaps you should. Again, this is very common with high achievers, because the solution is never more money, it's a plan. So, what does that plan actually look like? And more importantly, what specifically does our friend Walter know that finally gave him the confidence to live his retirement rather than just manage it? 3 things, 3 actionable things that I'm going to share with you right now. The first is his sustainable spending number. Not a rule of thumb like 4% applied generically, but a real modeled figure based on his actual accounts, his Social Security income, his expenses, and a stress-tested projection across multiple market scenarios. Walter knows that he can spend $5,800 a month and that his plan survives a 2008 style crash, a prolonged low return environment, and a lifespan to age 95. That number didn't come from a calculator on the internet, rather it came from doing the actual work, and once he had it, it changed everything. Gerald, by way of contrast, has his own version of that number. Given his portfolio, his Social Security income once he claims it, and his spending trajectory, a well-constructed plan would likely show him he could spend more than $20,000 per month when he retires, comfortably, without ever running out. That number is real and achievable, but it only becomes real when someone actually builds the model, stress tests it across bad market scenarios, builds in contingency planning, and puts it in front of him in writing. And until that happens, it's just a feeling. And feelings, as Gerald knows better than most, are not the same as certainty. Now, the second thing is his income map. So Walter has a clear picture of what his income looks like at every age. Social Security at 70, RMDs beginning at age 73, Roth conversions between now and then to reduce the tax burden later, not only for himself, but for those grandchildren. He knows which accounts he's going to draw from first and why. He knows when his income sources change and how to adjust around them. There are no surprises waiting for him because he's already spent the time planning around them. Now, the third thing that Walter has that Gerald does not is his bad market response. This is the one that most retirees don't have, and the one that matters most when markets do what they sometimes do. Walter knows exactly what he'd do if the markets dropped 30% tomorrow. Not because he's guessing, but because his plan has a written protocol. He doesn't need to make a decision under stress because that decision was already made under clarity. This is what lets him put the phone down in the morning instead of refreshing the app. He might be doing more Roth conversions. He might be deciding that this is the year to actually contribute to the grandchild's 529 earlier while the markets are down. He might be tightening the belt a little bit. It all depends on where the goals are at that time. And Gerald has none of these three things. Not because he can't afford them, but because no one has ever built them for him, and he hasn't yet demanded them of himself or his advisors. Now, the research on this is really quite striking. When I was getting ready to do this video, I found several things which stood out to me, and I'll share a few of them with you now. For instance, a study by the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that retirees with a predictable, reliable income stream, those who know what's coming in each month and trust it, report being very satisfied with retirement at a rate of 61%. Among those without that clarity, the figure drops to 45%. That's not a small difference. That's a fundamentally different retirement experience driven not by wealth, but by something entirely in the mind, which is that certainty and the confidence in it. And EBRI's broader spending research reinforces the same point. Retirees who lack income clarity tend to underspend even when they could afford more, hoarding more than living, saving rather than enjoying, because the fear of running out quietly overrides every spending decision they make. It's a tax on enjoyment that no account balance can eliminate. Only information and a plan can. Walter isn't richer because he has less to worry about. He's richer because he did the work, or had someone do it with him, that can replace uncertainty with clarity. Gerald's $5 million is real, but until he builds the plan, he's not going to feel it. So, if you've been carrying that quiet uncertainty, wondering whether what you have is actually enough to last, that is exactly what we help with here at Norberg Wealth. If you go ahead and click the link below and answer a short questionnaire, you can book a call with us to discuss your numbers, your goals, and we can help answer your concerns about retirement. As Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has little who is poor, but the man who craves more." Now, I would offer a slight amendment for our purposes. It is not the man who has little who is anxious, but the man who doesn't know what he has. Walter knows, and knowing, not the number itself, is what sets him free. That truth allows him to live a retirement of fulfillment and human flourishing. The richest retirement isn't the one with the largest balance. It's the one where you've answered the question that matters most and then put it down for good. Gerald's $5 million is waiting to become that retirement. It's been waiting for a while now, and all it needs is a plan. If this is you, again, I'd encourage you, go ahead and click the link below. I'd love to talk to you and hear more about what you'd like your retirement to look like. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you out there. All right, before we